Mohamed Salah thought he was walking into a simple TV interview, but what awaited him was a carefully planned attempt to humiliate him in front of millions. The host, known for his ruthless tactics, had prepared everything to corner Salah with tough questions and embarrassing clips. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Stay with us until the end, and let us know in the comments where you are watching from today. We'd love to hear from you. Mohamed Salah sat in his quiet home, enjoying a rare moment of peace when his phone buzzed. His agent, Karim, had just forwarded an invitation from one of the most controversial talk shows on television. "Salah, they want you on the spotlight next week," Karim said over the phone. Salah raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that the show where they try to embarrass guests for ratings?" Karim hesitated. "Yes, but it's also a massive platform. Millions watch it. They'll try to provoke you, but I know you can handle it." Salah leaned back, thinking. He had faced pressure on the biggest stages in football: Champions League finals, World Cup qualifiers, hostile stadiums. Could a TV presenter really shake him? A few hours later, the internet was buzzing. The show's host, Mark Daniels, had posted a cryptic message. "Next week, we bring a so-called football legend to the test. Is he really that great? We'll find out." Fans immediately speculated. Some were excited to see Salah on the show, others worried he was walking into a trap. The following days, rumors swirled. Journalists debated what kind of questions Mark would throw at Salah. Would he bring up missed penalties? Would he compare him unfairly to Messi and Ronaldo? The night before the interview, Salah sat with his family, smiling at his daughter as she laughed at a cartoon. "They might try to break me tomorrow," he thought, "but they don't know what I've already overcome." He wasn't going for Mark Daniels. He wasn't going for the controversy. He was going because the world needed to see what true strength looked like. The bright studio lights beamed down on Mohamed Salah as he adjusted his microphone. The applause faded as Mark Daniels, the host, leaned forward with a smirk. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest tonight," Mark announced, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "A man who has conquered the world of football, or has he?" Salah smiled politely, unfazed. Mark continued, flipping through his notes. "Mohamed, let's be honest. People call you a legend, but do you truly believe that? Or are you just a good player who got lucky in the right team?" A hush fell over the audience. Salah kept his composure. "I've worked hard to be where I am, but I don't decide who is a legend. That's for the fans and history to decide." Mark chuckled. A humble response. Convenient. But let's dig deeper. He turned to the screen behind them, where a clip began to play. Salah missing a crucial penalty in an international match. Another clip showed him being substituted after a frustrating performance. "Does watching this make you uncomfortable?" Mark asked, leaning in. Salah watched the screen, his expression unreadable. When the clips ended, he nodded slowly. "Not at all. Failure is part of success. Every great player has moments like these. The difference is how you respond." Mark's smile faltered for a second. "Interesting, but some say you aren't at the level of Messi or Ronaldo, that you don't have the same aura. How do you respond to that?" Salah smiled. "I don't play to be compared. I play to be better than I was yesterday." The audience murmured in appreciation. Mark shifted in his chair, realizing Salah wasn't falling into his trap. He had planned to rattle him, but Salah wasn't just answering questions. He was winning over the crowd. Mark Daniels smirked as he tapped his fingers on the table. He had played this game before: corner the guest, show their worst moments, and watch them squirm under the pressure. It made for great television. "Well, Mohamed," he said, leaning back, "since you claim not to be uncomfortable with failure, let's take a trip down memory lane." The lights dimmed slightly, and the massive screen behind them flickered to life. The first clip showed Salah in a high-stakes match, sprinting towards goal only to scuff his shot wide at the last moment. The camera zoomed in on his devastated face. The second clip showed him missing a crucial penalty for Egypt, his head down as the opposing team celebrated. Then came another. Salah being substituted off after a poor performance, frustration visible in his expression. The audience shifted in their seats. Some chuckled uncomfortably, others watched in silence, waiting to see how he would react. Mark turned to him with a grin. "Not exactly your highlight reel, is it?" Salah sat motionless, his fingers lightly interlocked. He exhaled slowly, then looked at Mark. "You've played football before, right?" he asked calmly. Mark raised an eyebrow. Not professionally. Then let me explain something. Salah turned slightly toward the audience. In this sport, you fail more than you succeed. You miss chances, you lose games. That's football. Mark chuckled. But don't great players rise above that? Don't they deliver when it matters? Salah nodded. Of course, but do you know what every legend in this sport has in common? He gestured toward the screen. They all have clips just like these, missed penalties, tough nights, games they wish they could replay. The difference is they didn't let these moments define them. The audience murmured in agreement. Mark shifted in his seat, sensing the energy shifting. Salah continued, his voice steady. You showed a missed penalty. What you didn't show was the next game where I scored twice. You showed me frustrated, being subbed off, but you didn't show the times I played through pain to help my team win. The applause started soft at first, then grew louder. Mark forced a smile. That's a nice speech, Mohamed, but let's be real. You're a great player, sure, but there are levels to greatness. Do you really think you belong in the same conversation as Messi or Ronaldo? The room fell silent. Salah took a deep breath, then looked Mark in the eye. I don't play football to be compared to anyone. I play to inspire, to make my country proud, to give everything for my team. Whether that makes me a legend or not, time will decide. A few members of the audience clapped, then more joined in. Mark's smile twitched. He wasn't losing control of the interview. He had already lost it, but he wasn't done yet. All right, fair enough, he said, forcing a chuckle. But let's test that humility of yours a little more, shall we? The tension in the room remained high. Salah sat back, prepared for whatever came next. Mark Daniels leaned forward, tapping his fingers against the desk. He had underestimated Salah's composure. The footballer hadn't fallen into his traps, hadn't lashed out, hadn't given him the viral moment of frustration he was hoping for. But Mark wasn't done. He had one last play. Let me ask you something, Mohamed, Mark said, tilting his head slightly. People call you a legend, a role model, but let's be honest. Do you really believe that? Or are you just a decent player who happened to be in the right place at the right time? The room fell completely silent. The question was designed to humiliate, to force Salah to either defend himself arrogantly or downplay his own achievements. Either way, Mark expected him to slip up. Salah, however, didn't react immediately. He let the weight of the words settle in the room. He could feel every eye on him, some waiting for a rebuttal, others bracing for the worst. He finally exhaled and leaned forward slightly, his fingers loosely clasped together. Mark, he said, his voice calm. What makes a legend? Mark blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? I mean, how do you define it? Is it the number of goals, the trophies, the fame? Salah continued, his tone steady. Because if that's all it takes, then football would have hundreds of legends. But we both know that's not true. Mark shifted in his chair. So what's your definition? Salah gave a small smile. A legend isn't just about winning. It's about how you inspire, how you lift those around you, how you face challenges, not just when you're at your best, but when the world is against you. The audience was completely silent, hanging on to every word. Mark cleared his throat. All right, but there are plenty of players who inspire. What makes you any different? Different? Salah nodded. That's a fair question. Let me tell you a story. He adjusted his seat and looked directly at Mark. When I was a child in Egypt, I had to take a 4-hour bus ride every day just to train. My parents sacrificed everything so I could have a chance, just a chance to make it. I wasn't the biggest, I wasn't the fastest, but I had something that no one could take from me. My belief that I could do more. Mark leaned back slightly. And when I moved to Europe, people said I wouldn't make it. When I struggled at Chelsea, they said I wasn't good enough. When I lost the Champions League final to Real Madrid, they said I wasn't strong enough. But I never let those words define me. Salah's voice was calm, but there was an undeniable intensity in his eyes. You see, Mark, I don't play football to be compared to others. I don't wake up thinking, am I as good as Messi or Ronaldo? That's not my motivation. He gestured toward the audience. I play for the kid watching this who thinks his dreams are too big. I play for the boy in Egypt taking that same long bus ride, wondering if he'll ever make it. I play for my family, my people, my team. The applause started slowly, one person, then another, then almost the entire studio. Mark forced a tight smile. That's a nice speech, but it still doesn't answer the question. Do you think you're a legend? Salah chuckled softly. That's not for me to say, that's for time to decide. The applause grew louder. Mark, realizing he had lost control of the narrative, quickly turned to the camera. Well, there you have it, folks. Mohamed Salah, the man, the myth, maybe the legend. He forced a laugh, but the energy in the room had shifted. Salah had turned the interview into something Mark never intended. It wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about resilience, about legacy, about character. And in that moment, it was clear to everyone watching. Salah had already won. Mark Daniels tapped his pen against the desk, his frustration barely concealed behind a forced smile. He had underestimated Salah. The footballer had dodged every trap, turned every attempt at humiliation into a moment of quiet wisdom. But Mark wasn't finished yet. All right, Mark said, shifting in his seat. I'll give you credit. You handle pressure well. But let's talk about something else. Some people say you don't have the personality of a true football icon, that you lack charisma. Salah raised an eyebrow. Charisma? Mark nodded. Look at players like Cristiano Ronaldo. He commands attention. He's loud, confident. People hang on to his every word. But you're reserved. Some might say even a little boring. Do you think that holds you back? The question hung in the air, clearly meant to sting. Salah tilted his head, considering his response. Tell me something, Mark, he said, his voice calm. When you think of a leader, what comes to mind? Mark hesitated. Someone who inspires people, who makes an impact. Salah nodded. Exactly. And there's more than one way to do that. He shifted slightly in his chair, his posture relaxed yet firm. Some lead with their voice, some lead with their actions. I was raised to believe that a man doesn't need to shout to be strong. He needs to show strength in how he carries himself. The audience murmured, nodding in agreement. Mark exhaled through his nose, pushing forward. But football is entertainment. Fans want passion. They want emotion. Some critics say you don't show enough of that you don't excite people the way others do. Salah's expression didn't change. You think passion is about how loud you are? Mark shrugged. In a way, yes. Salah leaned forward. Then you've never seen a kid in Cairo wearing my jersey playing in the streets pretending to be me. You've never seen the Egyptian people watching me score in a World Cup qualifier, crying because they waited 28 years for that moment. That's passion, Mark. It's not about how much noise you make. It's about how much you mean to people. A ripple of applause spread through the audience. Mark's jaw tightened slightly. He knew he was losing the room. Salah continued, his voice unwavering. Football isn't about me standing in front of cameras telling people how great I am. It's about stepping onto the pitch and proving it every single time. And if that's not enough for you, maybe you're looking at the wrong things. The audience erupted into full applause. Mark let out a short laugh, clearly uncomfortable. Well, he said, flipping a page in his notes, you certainly have a way with words, Mohamed. Salah simply smiled. Mark sighed and tried one last angle. Let's shift gears. You've had your fair share of controversies, too. You've been accused of diving, of exaggerating contact to win penalties. Some say that's not what a true professional should do. What do you say to that? The room tensed. Salah's reputation had been questioned before, and Mark knew he was touching a nerve. Salah took a deep breath, his fingers lightly tapping the armrest of his chair. Football is a fast game. Sometimes you get fouled, sometimes you don't. I've never been a player who looks for excuses. My job is to play, not to argue with referees. But do you think it affects your legacy? Mark pressed. Salah met his gaze steadily. My legacy isn't built on what people say about me. It's built on what I do on the field. The crowd clapped again, and for the first time Mark looked visibly flustered. He had tried everything: humiliation, comparison, controversy, but Salah had countered every move with composure. Salah glanced toward the audience, his smile warm. Football isn't perfect. No player is perfect. But I know one thing. I've given everything to this game, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters. The standing ovation began, growing louder and louder. Mark forced a grin, clearly trying to save face. Well, Mohamed, you certainly know how to handle tough questions. Salah chuckled. I've handled tougher things in my life. Mark extended his hand. All right, I'll give you that. Thanks for coming on the show. Salah shook his hand firmly. Thanks for having me. As the cameras cut, The show's producers scrambled to cut to a commercial break, but the damage was done. Salah hadn't just survived the interview, he had won it, and the world was about to see it. The red light on the camera faded, signaling the end of the live broadcast, but the tension in the studio remained. Mark Daniels unclipped his microphone, forcing a tight-lipped smile as he extended a hand toward Salah. "Good show," Mark said, his voice strained. Salah shook his hand, his grip firm but polite. "Thank you," he replied simply. As Salah turned to leave, a quiet murmur spread through the audience. Some whispered to each other, others pulled out their phones, already tweeting about what they had just witnessed. Mark sat back in his chair, watching as his production team scrambled around him. He could already tell this wasn't the reaction he had wanted. Instead of the usual headlines mocking his guest, Salah had stolen the spotlight. The crowd wasn't talking about his sharp questioning, they were talking about Salah's dignity. One of the producers approached him hesitantly. Mark, we're already trending." Mark straightened up, masking his nerves. "Good," he said, forcing a grin. "What's the headline?" The producer hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. "Well, it's not exactly what we planned." Mark grabbed his phone and pulled up social media, his stomach dropping. "Respect Salah. Salah owns the interview," Daniels exposed. He scrolled through the comments. Mark Daniels tried to humiliate Salah and ended up looking like a fool. Salah just gave a master class on handling pressure. That's what a real legend looks like. Mark clenched his jaw. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Meanwhile, Salah walked toward the exit of the studio, his agent Karim catching up to him. "That was incredible," Karim said, barely able to contain his excitement. Salah shrugged, his expression neutral. "I just answered his questions." Karim shook his head. "No, you owned him. That interview is already viral. People are calling it one of the best responses to a hostile interviewer they've ever seen." Salah smiled slightly but didn't let it get to his head. "People will talk today, then they'll move on to the next story." Karim pulled out his phone, showing Salah the trending posts. "Not this time. This is different." Salah glanced at the screen but didn't say much. He had never cared about social media hype. He knew how quickly people changed opinions. One day you were a hero, the next you were a villain. Back inside the studio, Mark Daniels was in full damage control. He stormed into the production office, slamming the door behind him. "How did this happen?" he snapped. One of the junior producers hesitated. Salah just handled it really well." Mark exhaled sharply. "I need a follow-up, something to shift the conversation. Maybe we say he dodged the real questions." His PR manager, a woman in her early 40s, sighed. "Mark, this isn't going away. People are praising Salah because he stayed calm and respectful while you looked aggressive." Mark scoffed. "I was doing my job." "Sure," she replied. "But there's a difference between tough questioning and trying to provoke someone," and the audience saw the difference. Mark slumped into his chair, rubbing his temples. "Damage control," he muttered. "Book someone else, a bigger name. We need another story fast." But deep down he knew the truth. This interview would follow him for a long time. No matter what he did next, people would always remember the night Salah made him look small. Meanwhile, Salah sat in the back seat of his car, watching the city lights blur past the window. He didn't need to check his phone to know what was happening. The world had seen his response. He wasn't interested in the noise. He had a game to prepare for because that's what champions do. Mohamed Salah barely had time to process the interview before his phone started buzzing nonstop. Notifications flooded his screen, messages from teammates, journalists, and friends. "Bro, you just destroyed that guy," read a text from a fellow footballer. "That was legendary," another message said. Salah sighed and locked his phone. He wasn't interested in the drama. For him, the interview was already in the past. But outside, the world was still buzzing. By the time he reached home, the internet had exploded. Clips of the interview were everywhere: YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Every platform had a version of Salah's calm, collected responses to Mark Daniels' aggressive questioning. One clip in particular went viral. It was the moment Mark had tried to corner Salah with the question, "Do you really think you're a legend?" In the video, Salah's response played over and over again. "That's not for me to say. That's for time to decide." Underneath, the comments flooded in. "This is why Salah is different. No ego, just class." He didn't even need to insult the host. His composure said everything. Mark Daniels just got humbled on his own show. This is history. By morning, news outlets had picked up the story. Mohamed Salah silences talk show host with pure class, read one headline. TV analysts discussed it, sports journalists praised his attitude, even rival players admitted they respected him more after seeing how he handled the pressure. But perhaps the biggest surprise came from an unexpected source, Mark Daniels himself. The next evening, Mark released a short statement on social media. "I may not have expected it, but Mohamed Salah taught me something last night. Respect where it's due." Some saw it as an attempt at damage control, others believed it was a genuine realization. Either way, the public had already made up their minds. Salah had won the night. But for him, none of it mattered. He had training to do, a match to focus on, because no matter what the media said, the only place he wanted to prove himself was on the pitch. A week after the interview, the noise still hadn't died down. Every sports outlet was talking about it. Fans continued to post about Salah's responses. Even casual viewers, people who didn't usually follow football, were praising his composure. But Salah remained the same. As he arrived at the training ground, his teammates clapped jokingly. "Superstar," one of them teased. "Too big for us now, huh?" Salah laughed. "Relax, I'm still the same guy. Now let's focus, we have a game to win." Later that night, in a packed stadium, Salah stepped onto the pitch. The crowd roared his name. They weren't just cheering for a footballer, they were cheering for what he represented. Grace under pressure, dignity in the face of adversity. The match began, and Salah played with his usual intensity. In the 70th minute, he found himself one-on-one with the goalkeeper. He took a deep breath, remembered every moment that had led him here, and slotted the ball perfectly into the net. The stadium erupted. He didn't celebrate wildly, he simply pointed to the sky as he always did and jogged back to his position. The next day, the headlines weren't just about his goal. They were about his journey. Salah proves once again that greatness isn't just about talent, it's about character, read one. Mark Daniels' interview had been meant to tear him down. Instead, it had solidified his place as more than just a footballer, a true champion. And as Salah sat at home that night sipping tea with his family, he knew one thing: no matter what came next, he would always let his actions speak louder than words. Mohamed Salah's story is more than just football, it's about resilience, dignity, and proving your worth through actions, not words. If this story inspired you, make sure to subscribe and join us for more powerful tales of true champions. And tell us in the comments, what did you think of Salah's response? Would you have handled the interview the same way? Your support helps us bring more incredible stories to life. See you in the next video. God bless you.